Chapter 10, The Secret of Supply, Giving and Receiving, Two that are one. Let me tell you a paradox, Hans said to the soldier. The world in which we awaken each morning is not the real world. It is an image of the real. But those who know the world is an image of the real wake up to the real world every day. This is a paradox, and it is the truth. Pounding the stick in the dust. Rebecca is here, and she is a lovely lady. She and her husband are having problems meeting their financial obligations. It is difficult raising a family these days, as expensive as everything is. This brings to mind the story about pounding the stick in the dust when I was having such problems. It was about this time of year. Two men came to me wanting contributions to the Heart Fund and the community chest. I turned them down, as usual, with the old metaphysical response, saying aloud, I give in my own way, while silently I thought, why should I contribute to research for illusory diseases that don't really exist? I also recalled that just a week earlier, a young man had come to me wanting something to eat. When I asked him to help me work for half an hour until supper was ready, he walked away, saying, I'm hungry, man. Don't you understand? No, I didn't understand. I watched him stop at my neighbor's, where the lady of the house gave him something to eat. I stayed awake half the night justifying my action, concluding that no one gets anything for nothing in this world, and that I had done the right thing, asking him to work just a little for a meal. The seekers of truth I knew in those days, especially metaphysicians, were not much for giving to causes such as the Heart Fund or medical research or starving Africans. Anyway, the next morning I went to the woods, as I often did, to resolve my own supply problems, but this time there was no resolution. Nothing happened under the trees. I was as blank coming out of the woods as I was going in. Almost back home, I sat myself down under a tree one final time, hating to walk that last half mile back into the world. What am I doing wrong, God? I asked once again. How is it that I can help people with their problems, but I can't help myself with mine? I asked the question, and then it happened. The answer came as clearly as if a voice had spoken. The words flew into my head. You don't do enough giving, Bill, they said. Immediately I became angry and defensive. What do you mean, I don't do enough giving? If I didn't give so much of my time to everyone, I wouldn't be in this difficulty. Again the inner voice said, Bill, you don't give enough. I pounded my stick on the ground and saw a cloud of dust rise. It was a hot, dry day in August. Damn it, all I do is give to anybody and everybody that comes my way asking for truth. I never say no or ask for anything in return. I pounded the stick, and the dust flew again. Incidentally, that stick is in the back of my car to this day, still used when I walk through the woods or hunt arrowheads along the river. As the dust settled, I heard it again. You have read it many times, Bill. Give to God what is God's, and to Caesar what is Caesar. I give God what is God's as best I can, and you know that. The soldier Bill pounded the stick again. But you don't give Caesar what is Caesar's. This inner argument remains vivid to this day, as surely as the memory of the overwhelming inner joy in South Carolina one summer when I was a kid, as surely as the memory of light experienced in San Francisco last summer. Give Caesar what is Caesar's? I yelled incredulously. Give to Caesar? Why should I give to Caesar? Caesar is the belief. Caesar is the illusion. That's the unreal. Why give to an illusion, the belief of a life in matter? And I pounded the stick again into the ground with grand arrogance known only to the people who have discovered subjectivism and the unreality of the world. There was silence. I had my conscience backed into its own corner. Give to Caesar my foot, then this whatever that pops into one's head asked a question of me. Tell me something, Bill. Where do you need money and help? In God's world or in Caesar's world? Dear God, in the twinkling of an eye, a glimpse had arrived, and I understood something new and wonderful. As usual, it seemed at first that I had always known this. Something one thinks he has always understood fully. But somehow, this time, that something was different. This was new beyond new. It was plainly the point of my weakness in the world. I thought about the young man who was hungry and the two who had wanted support for the community chest and the heart fund. Even while the dust was settling from the flailing stick, I realized that I had not been giving to Caesar's world. No, I had been withholding, storing agony for myself. I had not been completing the interface. Quick as a flash, I saw what to do in the world. Isn't it always a grand relief to suddenly know what to do when one has been suffering? But just as that wonderful knowledge arrived, there came the realization that I had very little of the world's goods left to give. Everything with my business was attached, awaiting payment of a big business indebtedness to a supplier. Just before heading for the woods, I had scolded my little boys for wearing out their shoes so quickly, wondering where the money to buy new ones would come from. If I was to give to Caesar's world, what could I give? Across the dusty road, a patch of bright, brown-eyed Susans bloomed along the fence. I picked a bouquet and took it to my neighbor down the street. From that day to this, I have understood the admonition about giving to the world of appearances if I expected that the world would give back to me. Most surely, we give our spiritual gifts, but we give the sack of beans too. I met the business obligation to the supplier, and all my worldly goods were released to me again. Why had no one in metaphysics told me about this requirement to give to Caesar? Because subjectivism without the child simply doesn't include this requirement. If it did, it would have found the child's equation long ago to include in the subjective textbooks. If it did, those organizations would be prospering today, not drawing on the vine. For every supply problem, the admonition is loud and clear, simple and elegant. Give God what is God's and give Caesar what is Caesar's. This statement is not a parable. It is a simple statement about how one is to conduct himself in the world if he wants things to go well in his world. As a metaphysician, I had been good enough about giving God what is God's, but I used my subjectivism as a selfish excuse to withhold from the world, all in the name of my grand metaphysical absoluteness and knowledge. Today, look at what mankind has stored away for itself by not living the equation. Enough useful energy to pound the entire earth to dust. From that day at the edge of the woods to this, I have made it a point to give to my world something beyond the ordinary every day of my life. The ineffable, in turn, has given back to me countless ways beyond the ordinary, including knowledge of the equation. As I sit writing this today for what may be my last gift to my unseen selfhood, I can be certain that 99% of those who read these hard words will take note of them one way or another, positively or negatively. They will contemplate them and their hearts will respond, suggesting that a simple and tender truth beyond ordinary comprehension is being stated here. Then, like me, they will one day test these truths to see for themselves, and their affairs in the world will begin to bloom immediately. But only one metaphysician in 1,000 will think to thank God or thank anyone for writing the human words. Not seeing the necessity for that is another of those blind spots or bends in the river within the subjective view. It will remain so until the time one begins to put his subjectivism to work in the world. This is understandable. Our subjective search time is our within time, not our interface with the world time. During much of our subjective unfolding, we haven't yet learned that the outside is the inside. We've been too busy denying the outside's reality. Let one find the child within himself first. Then he can learn the lessons of interface without having to deny the reality of the world. When one discovers what the world is about, he learns what to do with that world and begins doing it. We act. Perhaps contemplating the interface is part of a lesson that cannot be learned until one has stopped making that interface, thence to rediscover it, even as the child is lost in order to be rediscovered and lived. The meal the young man was too hungry to work for and wait half an hour for was a huge bowl of homemade bean soup, a specialty I loved during those lean years. The bouquet of flowers I brought from the woods a few days later and gave to my neighbor resulted in an invitation to come into her home and have a warm bowl of soup. I watched my bouquet of flowers turn into a tangible bowl of bean soup. This time I learned the lesson. About the Jeremiah papers. The child hears the hard teachings and knows they are true. The old man of us rails in discomfort. The more uncomfortable the old nature, the more likely the child to be delivered from the ashes of adulthood. It is the child who stirs within us in the light of the glorious glimpses. It is the child who, having stirred, revives us, and then we become the child. The child and the heart are the same. The child is in touch with the eternal, our absolute interface with the ineffable, the one, the mountain beyond name. So, we are not disheartened by the prophet's hard words. He comes to us in the final days, tangibly or intangibly, to take us by the shoulders and shake us out of our ruts. We may rail at his pronouncements and dislike his effrontery. We may not like having our sophisticated and cultivated facade torn away, or our carefully hidden nastiness exposed. But beneath our discomfort and behind our inclination to turn away, the child of us, the heart of us, knows his hard words are true. The nations who dismiss their prophets have been destroyed, their inhabitants dispersed. We hear their words, and the child comes alive again. A new nation is born. The prophets have nearly every one spoken of a mysterious child and childlikeness to prevail in the end days of linear time. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Isaiah. About the secrets of supply. Dear William, if you know so damn much, why aren't you rich? Love, George. P.S. I ask respectfully, but I am serious. Dear George, I presume you mean money, since I am wealthy beyond belief in other ways? Dear William, I mean exactly what I wrote. Why aren't you rich? If the truth is worth attaining, it should certainly bring a monetary reward. If you are merely surviving without the sweet amenities of abundance, as I hear, why should I pay attention to your words? Dear George, it is not my words that matter, but your own. However, your question deserves a good and clear answer, especially since so many in the world believe that personal wealth and possessions are an indication of success. But when I write that answer in full, it will be written for my world. Please be patient with me while I sort out the words to speak to supply more clearly than I have ever done before. Reader, please note, all that follows in this book, except for the related papers section, is predicated on the knowledge of specific points that have been made in the earlier chapters. I am writing overtones now. Overtones upon overtones follow. Supply. Dear George, now to answer that question you asked me 12 years ago. I appreciate your long wait. Certain esoteric secrets are self-guarded. Those bits of wisdom are the ones that come from the inside first, not necessarily related to the sights and sounds one gets on the outside. In some instances, understanding comes to the inside, but only when the secret is lived consciously or unconsciously in the world. The wonder of such a marvelous secret is that we can be told of it by those who know it, and, trusting the teller, we do as he suggests. Then comes our reward, the secret, quite beyond intellectualism, words, or anything the wealth of the world can buy. Without trust, we seldom do anything that is required. Such a secret is the child's mighty equation. When people who have not managed to put the me sense behind them for a time come to study here, and many don't even know a sense of self is to be understood and let go, they sometimes try to write down the words I say, as if that would capture the secrets those words seem to contain. They believe they have caught the secret in their linear words or in mine. But regarding the equation, unless they are living that mystery, they have only the narrowest idea about what is being said as we talk of it. Or, sometimes, they don't even hear the words. But if someone trusts and believes me, it is a different matter. Han and the Peddler. The old peddler has a house as neat as a pin, said Han. Yes, Ho answered, because he doesn't accumulate things but offers them to the world. Dear George, prostrate in depression. You say you have no light to give to your world. Well, if that's how it seems to you, you can now take the first step in lifting yourself from that bed of anguish. Get up, get out, and give someone a gift. Take some of that tangible wealth that you do have and give a bit of that to someone who needs it. Make this gift today, George, even if you merely walk down the street with an old sweater in your hand and give it to the first man who looks as if he needs it. It is not easy to take this first step toward the real wealth, but do it. Just trust me and do it. I tell you this remarkable wonder because your letter tells me that you are in need of it. I have lived this process and know it is true. We give a portion of our substance to the world, and as the consequence of that tangible giving, we soon receive a glimpse of light. That glimpse is manna from heaven, the real reward of giving to Caesar's world. The glimpse that comes shortly after the warm glow of doing something for another person outside one's own family is the light, the spirit, the word that proceeds out of the mouth of the Lord. It is the spirit of life that comes with healing on its wings. Do this for yourself today, dear friend George, and watch what happens. Let the student of truth, who feels he has no light to give something of his substance, however little he has, and soon he will have an infusion of light, a glimpse of truth, to give as well. To whom? To anyone who seems to need it or deserve it. One cannot know this is a marvel to do until he has done it and lived it so. This is a self-protected secret. The illustration of the seed. George, dear old friend, I'm glad the depression is over. Your new bother isn't new to me either. I suspect you've fallen into the same trap that held me a victim for so long. As you can see, when you gave your big favorite sweater to the old man down the hall, you perked yourself up sufficiently to write this bombastic letter about my blindness to dualism. This is a point at which a little knowledge of metaphysics can be deadly. Hence the many cautions against beginning the search without a willingness to go all the way. George, in the name of denying what I thought was dualism, I nearly destroyed myself. In an astonishing ignorance of oneness, I denied the nature of all two-ness, as if one song couldn't have two renditions, or a form two uses. A single bottle has an inside and an outside, a top and a bottom. Is that dualistic? In the metaphysical proclivity toward the insanity of denying every dual appearance, I failed to see the real truth behind the action of still another dualism. Number one, giving and receiving, and number two, receiving and giving. Giving and receiving are not two. They are one flowing process to which we, as metaphysicians, awaken more slowly than most. Could it be that you are laboring in the same darkness? If so, the words that follow will be blessed with light to walk by. Listen gently. We plant a seed in our garden and let nature do its work. If the seed is to survive in this world, it begins giving immediately. But here we come to the natural built-in blindness of subjective thinking. Note, the seed gives, acts twice, once to the earth and once to the sky. One shoot goes out as a rootlet, another goes up as the stem. One is a gift to the earth, the other a gift to the light of light. This process is so in all nature. It is before our eyes everywhere. Every living thing shows us this simple principle, dual as the words make it sound. All one has to do to see this is to look for himself. Show me a tree that isn't living this principle, and I will show you a dying or dead tree. Now we see that the seed receives twice. Here we go again, George. Another disdainful dualism that the tree had better not try to avoid. It receives twice, once from the earth and again from the air. In all nature this is true, my friend, even if all nature is just a dream that isn't happening. Then, for those who continue to search for the secret with persistence, we observe that the nutrition the seed receives from the earth is passed along the stem to the sky, the plant keeping only what is necessary for growth, and that growth enabling it to give yet more to the earth with greater roots, and likewise the wonders the tree receives from the light of the sun and beyond are passed on quickly in a marvelous flow downward into the earth, the tree withholding only what is necessary to grow and bear fruit after its kind. In all nature, this is so. Finally, we observe that wherever this flowing process of giving to Caesar and giving to God is stopped, or even interrupted for long, the plant languishes and gradually perishes. In all nature, this is so. How do I know? By looking and observing. George, wherever mankind recognizes this process within himself and lives in harmony with it, he prospers beyond his wildest imagination. Wherever the principle is broken, he withers, without luster in his life and without any contribution to his experience or to his world. To see that this is so, look around for yourself. Those who withhold grow heavy and depressed in spirit. Their mental houses are stuffed with trivial things. As a metaphysician, I was good enough about giving God what is God's, but I was woefully inadequate about giving to the world beyond those things that I had to give. Why should I give to an illusion? I asked, just as your letter asked me, in no small wonderment. Yet, in the old days, I wondered why I had so little of the world's riches to pay my utility bills when they came due. I had nothing of the world's value because I had given little or nothing of the world's value to the world, beyond the mandatory taxes and prices I paid for things that I needed. The Christly admonition is plain. Give to the world, external, the things that are the world's. Orthodox Churchdom is consistently good about this kind of giving. Its members give tangible things to the tangible world. They give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and religion generally prospers in material ways as a consequence. Look at their sprawling megaplexes. More, the prospering churches do all kinds of charitable things in the world and bring their members to make substantial gifts toward those activities. Metaphysicians like to point out that churches are unaware of the complete principle of supply. But those sweet church people to whom the metaphysician feels superior give to their world and flourish thereby in worldly goods. What is more, the whole earth is blessed by those people. It is the metaphysician himself who often knows little of the whole story of supply. One must look long and hard to find a school for charity's children sponsored by a metaphysical group. Show me a home sponsored by metaphysicians for the aged children of the world who haven't the money to take care of themselves, George. There are many who are first who shall be last, said the Christ light of genuine love. All right, George, I've written these words again for whatever purpose they may serve. You may have to put them in your pipe and smoke them a few more weeks, months, or years, but one day you'll come to understand a wonderful principle, just as I did. The Christ of history spoke of this principle 2,000 years ago, and so did Abraham before him. Instead of writing about the dualism that entraps you, give some attention to how and why you have recovered from the awful depression, that old new disease of the affluent society. Two kinds of giving. Certainly, as far as time and space go, there are two kinds of giving and two kinds of receiving, to and from the world, to and from spirit. It is the flow again, the inside and outside, the outside and inside. Our metaphysical training, as it has come to us from the present textbooks, leaves us absolutely blind to this. Most of the subjectivists I have known had no idea about real giving whatever, and that's sad, considering the glut of words written in the name of supply. As the earnest metaphysician, I overlook the essential relationship between these two because I thought any such idea was dualistic. And for 30 years I've found the same blindness in others at the metaphysical bend in the river, especially those who withdrew from their organizations before they learned what was there to learn. Oh, but there is much, much more to learn about the equation. If you are looking for the secrets of supply, read on and listen. This chapter has been part of the hard teaching. It seems, for a brief time, to heap guilt on the heads of those, like me, who didn't know about giving. Though I needed to hear these things long years ago, I only want to rehear them gently now, because the equation is not an easy point for the world to hear. Unless this is comprehended in clarity, it is a place for the old nature to scream obscenities. Sequentiality, or why explanations are difficult. When something significant happens in our affairs, nearly any kind of event, it happens as a series of sequential events that are nearly instantaneous. It is considered impossible to explain the totality of this series in one telling. For this reason, many of our experiences are not understood immediately. Even when they are, it seems impossible to explain to others so they can grasp them with the clarity we would like. Let me explain the mysterious series idea. One pulls the trigger of a loaded shotgun. There follows, almost at the same time, an explosion, a jolt against the shoulder, and a great splash in the water where the target bottle floated a second before. Following that, we hear the echoes of the gunshot resounding from the hills. The physicist is concerned with, or attuned to, the trigger pull and the jolt against the shoulder. The musician most notices the sharp sounds and the echoes along the riverbank. The artist sees the splash of water and the circling waves coming to shore through the haze of burned gunpowder. The event is viewed through a multi-mist of emotions: surprise, fear, hatred, disgust, excitement, on to near infinity. It is also viewed through the preferences of the viewer. The artist sees what he wants to see. The physicist thinks in his own preferred terms. How does one speak clearly to these different viewpoints at once? Or even in the same book? It seems impossible, but it can be done. We are looking for it in this book. Well now, what has this to do with this matter of supply? Consider, when one nears the peak of Dishon, and one is nearing it, or he wouldn't be reading this kind of material, the circling trip around the mountain to the top takes ever less time. The scenes below repeat themselves, each time from a different perspective, slightly altered. We don't get the next view until we have been willing to leave the present view and move on. Then, at the peak, we are able to look wherever we wish, and all the views appear simultaneously. The final view, compared with the first view when we first began our climb, is overwhelming, to say the least. At the lower slopes, our dispatches to those behind us were easy enough to write. But what we wrote along the way wasn't the final view of things. At first, we thought the old scenes were left behind forever, and we had no way of knowing how often they would be back to be seen again, and yet again, from the circling positions above. During our study of subjectivism, we have special difficulty coming to grips with the fact that nothing, absolutely nothing, has been overcome until it is understood fully, and that so long as one is breathing the air of the world, there remains something to be understood about the light of life and the world it creates. The absolute position, subjectivism without the child, fails in the final analysis. The metaphysician, as helpless as anyone before the appearances of the body's death, all the years of study, meditation, contemplation, and devotion notwithstanding. As awareness itself, we are every man. We are all the onlookers, physicist, artist, musician, seeker, and finder. One time we read or see through the artist's eyes. At another reading, we hear through the musician's ears. At another, we are the physicist, the mathematician, the astronomer. The occluding hazes of preferences or separateness cannot be let go of in the objective mode of thought, but they can be surrendered in the subjective mode when the child begins stirring and is found. We are not through until that happens. There even remains something to do when one stands atop the mountain understanding the scene, living as the child of God. We are charged to do something before the movement ends and the rest begins. What? Free our subjective view from the ties that bind therein. What is bound on earth is bound in heaven, and what is freed on earth is freed in heaven, just as Scripture says. Before we leave the mortal coil, we are charged to make peace with it, understand it, every bit of it, line upon line, precept upon precept, until that work is finished. How do we know when this is done? I am still being instructed, and these words are that of the instruction previously received, listened to, followed, confirmed, and finally written to myself. Only God knows when it is finished. The WOODSONG Boy. The little boy in me likes to go to the woodland and walk and camp and look for arrowheads. The little boy loves to taste the sunshine and listen to the blue sky. That's where I've been. I found a handful of arrowheads today, and they are beautiful. I heard the blue of the sky. I listened to the green of the grass, and felt a blossom explode into a wine of fragrance. Tangibility is the product of the intangible. Therefore, the body of us will find itself cared for, as certainly as the oak and willow, as surely as the laurel and lily. By whom or what? By the same ineffable for whom the body of humanity blossoms. How do I know this is so? Because I have lived it so, and am living it so now, and know it is so. Science and I will confirm it so. Watch and see. The mother of tangibility hovers o'er me, and I am without desire, satisfied. None who come to WOODSONG has left without hearing the melody that tells of the presence. Father, to whom tangibility is wed like notes of a symphony. Those who listen, really listen to the rustling pines overhead, will know in their hearts that tangibility is the delineation of infinity, just as surely as the notes that sound the symphony's melody are sounding it perfectly. WOODSONG, 1970. "Ah, so," said Han, "I am very tired. Who knows what a battle it is to say these things? Sharp edge, stay with me a little time longer." Amen.